Hi guys, today we are cooking Nilagang Baka, which is a Filipino beef soup. And Mexican restaurants actually have something similar. They call it Caldo de Res. I used beef shanks for this, or the bulalo as we call it in the Philippines. And for vegetables, I used sweet corn on a cob, potatoes, carrots, string beans, and cabbage. For spices, I used ginger and onion, then salt and pepper to taste. First, we cut up the vegetables, starting with the sweet corn on a cob. Then followed by the carrots. Then we cut up the cabbage. Then I cut up the potatoes. These potatoes are pretty small, so I just cut it in half. And rule of thumb, we must always soak our potatoes in water to avoid the potatoes turning brown. And if you notice, after I cut it up, I put it back in the bowl with water before I cooked it. I just leave it there in the bowl. It's got water in it. And here I am cutting the beef shank meat. And this meat has got a bone in the middle with bone marrow. So this is actually ideal for soups. At least that's the meat that we normally use for this dish. But you can use any kind of beef meat if you want. You just pierce the meat because it would depend on what kind of meat you're going to use, on how long to tenderize it. And then I cut up the string beans. It was cut up last because I had to get it from my backyard. These are backyard grown string beans. And so here we are, onion, garlic. These are the ingredients. I'm sorry, not garlic, but onion, ginger. And then we have the meat, the corn, the potatoes, the carrots, and then the cabbage, and also the string beans. And of course, let's not forget the salt and ground pepper. So we start by putting the meat in a pot with a lot of water because we need to boil and tenderize the meat. It will take about an hour or hour and a half for the meat to get tender, depending on what meat you're going to put in. And that is why we will need a lot of water. And I put salt and pepper to taste in the beginning. And then we make sure we put the lid or pot cover on. When it boils for the first time, we need to remove that brownish floating stuff on the top. I have always been told that those are impurities They always float at the beginning when it boils, and they do that no matter how well you washed your meat, it will still float. And we also have these in pork and chicken as well. I believe it is just blood from inside the meat that was released, but I just took their word for it and removed it anyway because it also causes your soup to have a dark brown color. So I removed them. You put the lid back on, and to make the meat tender, what I did also after an hour of boiling is I put the onion and the ginger in, added that in, and let that boil for a bit. As I said, tenderizing meat would depend on what kind of meat you put in there. And putting the lid or pot cover helps with the tenderizing process because it makes it faster, and because if you leave the lid open, chances are you will need to keep adding water because the water easily evaporates when the lid is open. After you check the meat for tenderness and you're satisfied with the tenderness, you could add in the rest of the vegetables. For me, I do it in a certain order because the vegetables don't cook at the same time. So I first put in the carrots, and I just let that boil for a minute, 1 minute. And after 1 minute of boiling, I add in the potatoes, and that would need another minute of boiling. And then after another minute of boiling, we add in the sweet corn and a cob. And I let that boil for about 2 minutes. Then I added in the string beans. I also let that boil for another minute. And then followed by the cabbage. So you just check for flavor. I know we added salt in the beginning, salt and ground pepper, but you can add salt and ground pepper, ground black pepper if necessary. It depends on your taste. You just mix them all up, all of those vegetables. You just give them a good mix. We let that boil for, once all of the vegetables are in, we let that boil for another 1 minute. And as I said, there's a reason for the order of when and which vegetable goes first. Some vegetables take longer to cook, and also we don't want to overcook the vegetables. Some people just put all the vegetables in at the same time, but I don't do that. Sometimes we need to think about how our food looks. If it looks appetizing, we should also concern ourselves with that, not just for the taste, but we want it to look appetizing. And that's the reason for the order of when the vegetables go in. And when it is done, rule of thumb for me on any dish, especially if everybody's ready to eat, of course, I normally just plate it immediately or as soon as possible because the pot is still hot and it will continue cooking the vegetables if you leave it there. and the vegetables will turn brown or overcooked. And actually the flavors change when the vegetables are overcooked. And if you cannot plate it up right away because you are not ready to eat or waiting for someone, at least do this. Don't put the lid on the pot, or leave it open and move it away from the hot stove so it won't keep cooking. Just don't put the lid back on when it's already cooked. So this is what it looks like when it's done. Bon appetit, and please hit like and subscribe for more videos. Thank you very much.